Hi everyone, welcome to Live Your Dream podcast. I'm your host Celina. In this episode, I talked to Hooni Kim, who is a chef and owner at restaurant Danji and Hanjan in New York City. We talk about how once an aspiring doctor became a chef and his experience of working at Daniel and Masa and why he decided to open a Korean restaurant after working at a French and Japanese restaurant. Also, Hooni talks about the most difficult time in his chef career, which was right after he opened his first restaurant, Danji. I actually remember being invited to the friends and family dinner the night before it officially opened, and at the time there was really no other upscale Korean restaurant in New York City, and I remember being a little bit nervous about how it was going to be received by the diners in New York. Hooni's actually one of the people I wrote about in my book, and when I first interviewed him, he had just recently opened Danji. And later on, I actually had to revise my story about him to include the fact that Danji had just received a Michelin star. It was the first time a Korean restaurant in the US had received the prestigious distinction, and I remember being so proud of him. So I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. So thank you so much for being here. You're the first person I interviewed for my book and also the first person to interview for the podcast. So it's a really meaningful moment for me. So thank you. And I'm really excited. So I have many questions, but I want to first start with your childhood. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Korea. I was born in Seoul. I lived in Seoul until I was, I think, 3 years old. And then I moved to England with my mom and lived there till I was about 10. And then since then, I've been living in New York most of my life. Went away to California for undergraduate school for a little bit, and then moved back to New York.
How was your childhood like? Were your parents strict?
Um, you know, having my father died when I was 2, so I grew up in a single parent household. My mother wasn't that strict, but I knew that um, I had to fend for myself
I
a
see.
lot. I went to boarding school as my first school experience in England when I was 4 years old. So that, I think, helped me become a little bit more independent. The structure, the discipline that they have in British boarding schools actually helped me quite a bit in my studies, just not doing dumb things. So, my schooling was not very difficult. When I came to the US, I basically, my mom was busy with school at first and then her own business. So a lot of the school decisions I made on my own, for instance, what high school I went to,
I see.
which college I went to, and deciding to leave for California, my mom wasn't very happy with. But I thought, at 18 years old, I needed to sort of stay, or not stay, but get away from my mother a little bit
I see.
for both of us, so we can sort of find ourselves. And I thought that was a very good decision. And since then, I've basically lived on my own, just as any American would. After you graduate college, you're on your own. I went to decided to go to medical school not because I was very into medicine, but my mother or any Korean mom would recommend
Right.
or would insist their son or their daughter to become a doctor or a lawyer. And I was always good at science. I went to Bronx Science, very science oriented high school. I went to UC Berkeley, which is also a very science oriented school. So, choosing the path of medicine was not a very difficult choice.
Right.
But to be honest, I really didn't have a passion for anything else I would rather do. So I did something that sort of, I guess, made my mom happy.
I see. So, transition from medicine to becoming a chef, I'm sure it wasn't a very easy one.
Mm, now I would think people wouldn't really consider it a difficult or an odd choice
Mm-hmm.
to change from medicine into cooking because now we know that cooking there's so much science behind cooking um, with molecular gastronomy, with just the whole health factor,
Right.
understanding the chemicals that go into our food, the physical changes in cooking of the food. But back then, which was I would say 15 years ago, um, yeah, cooking, being a chef was a very blue collar career. It wasn't a professional career that people thought of. It wasn't a safe career. It wasn't a very respected career. So, the biggest challenge was trying to prove to people, my mother, my friends, that it wasn't a big step down.
And how did you convince them, including your mother?
Um, I had to prove that I was happy with what I was doing and that I was good at what I was doing. And um, the level of success that can be attained, the level of pride
Mm-hmm.
that can be attained while being a chef was a significant factor
Right.
that happiness can be achieved.
Yeah.
Um, and the best way to do that was really initially to avoid them and to work really hard.
Right.
6, 7 days a week, 16, 18 hours a day.
Wow.
Just try to absorb as much as you can in information and experience. So later, when you are given the opportunity to sort of show what you've got,
Mm-hmm.
you have the ammunition. So yeah, I really didn't talk too much about what I was doing, what I wanted to do, why I did it. I just worked really hard.
Mm-hmm. How did your mom first react when, being a Korean mother? I'm sure she was like, "Oh, my son is
Um,
going to become a doctor,"
so it's funny and unfortunate that the exact time that I did change was when I got married, the first year I got married.
Right.
And my mother blamed my wife. Not in that, my wife made me change my career, but
Mhm.
why she didn't stop me.
Interesting. What do you think about that? Do you think she could have?
I would have never even dared drop out of medical school to cook if I didn't have the full 100% support of my wife.
Right.
Because it was something that I was very not afraid to do, but I just didn't think it was right.
Why did you not think it was right?
Because I was still in the impression that my mother and all my friends were right, and that being a chef was not as good as being a doctor.
So why did you do it?
Couple of things. I realized that, uh, well, I was watching my wife
Mm-hmm.
work as an attorney
Right.
in a very good firm, um, a very successful career for her, and she hated it.
Right.
She absolutely hated what she was doing, and she was miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized, I that could be me when I'm a doctor, because I just didn't have this passion for medicine, just like my wife didn't have a passion for law.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to be that. And as smart as my wife is and was as an attorney, she wasn't excelling
I
in
see.
her career just because her passion wasn't there. She didn't want to excel. And for me, I did not want to be a so-so doctor. You know, whatever I was or what was to become, I wanted to be a good one. And from then, I realized, there's a big chance that even if I become a doctor, I'm going to be a not so very good one. And that made me really think, um, well, if my choice was to become a very good chef versus a middle of the road doctor, I
Mhm.
thought being a chef would make me happier.
Hearing your experience of choosing this new career path, but I can't even imagine, because I went to law school and
Mm.
dropping out like the last semester after all that work you put through, and your parents are so proud of you. Graduation's just around the corner. You can become a doctor. And, where did you get the courage? How did you do it?
To be honest, I didn't drop out of medical school
Mhm.
initially. What I did was I took a 1 year sabbatical.
Mhm.
And then in that sabbatical, I went to culinary school. And then when that 1 year was up, I was actually interning at this dream job, a restaurant called Danielle.
Right.
And I was a non-paid intern, and they offered me a job.
Yeah.
And that was about a month before I went back to medical school. And for me, that's when I think I really had to decide whether to go back to medical school, or to actually get paid cooking at my dream restaurant.
So how did you decide?
But at that time, it wasn't really much of a decision. It really was 6 months, 1 year, maybe 5 years down the line. What would I regret more?
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
Not pursuing this new career, or a choice in cooking where I knew I was good, and I was at this job that people, worked 10 years. They worked really hard to get a job at Danielle, but luckily I was able to get a job right off the bat there. Um, that was a great opportunity. Getting into medical school, I understand, was a great opportunity too, but for what? To become a so-so doctor.
Mhm.
And basically I had to sort of, when you think about it, you think 5 years from now, I would probably regret not pursuing this culinary career more if I turned it down. So it was easy. It was just, I was happy with what I was doing. I was proud of my progression in cooking. I was so impressed by the chefs who were working at Danielle, and more so than the neurosurgeons that I work with in medicine. Um, so, when you, especially when you're young, you are in awe of people who are very good at your field,
Right.
and you want to become like them. And for me, it was the chefs who were more my idols than the doctors.
Huh. You looked up to them more.
Yeah, yeah. So it was just looking within. My soul was telling me which way to go,
Yeah.
and yeah.
But your wife was, you're recently married, your wife is working at this law firm.
Mhm.
And I know your wife, Ariel, is just a good friend of mine. We worked
Uh-huh.
at the same law firm together. So I know how tough it is to work at a law firm.
Mm.
But yet in the Korean American standard,
Yeah.
people might think that, hey, a doctor lawyer couple is a better match than a chef, right? Did you ever think about that? Because I talked to Catherine about this. So, I'd be curious to hear.
Well, Catherine was smart enough to know that two unhappy people
Uh,
in living in the same household working in two very stressful careers that they weren't fond with is more a recipe for destruction or a failed marriage than um, than having one person who's very happy with what they're doing.
Yeah.
Maybe not making a lot of money,
Mm-hmm.
but she, from her experience, I think, gave me the direction, gave me permission to really do what made me happy.
Right. You are a lucky guy married to a wise woman.
Yes, all her friends keep reminding me.
Yes. um, so, how did you first develop an interest in cooking and food and the idea of becoming a chef?
So I living in New York, it's difficult not to be a foodie.
Right.
And the fact that my mother didn't cook because she was so busy, I was eating out constantly, starting even in junior high, and definitely in high school. I remember my first fine dining experience was, I think, when I was a junior. So that must
Oh,
have been
wow, that's early.
1989, 1990. But in New York, and living in Manhattan, that's what you did.
Right.
You went to. We didn't have malls to go to. We didn't go to the theaters. We were too young to go to the bars. But we went to these nice restaurants with um, these private school girls that
Nice.
and we'd go spend 2-3 hours um, eating and sometimes drinking wine
When you're in junior high school.
no fine dining, yeah, it happened in high school.
Yeah.
But still, I think restaurants, when it comes to wine, especially European restaurants, are
Yeah.
okay
Right,
with
right.
younger patrons
Mhm.
enjoying a glass of wine with their dinner. And I fell in love with the theatrics of the whole presentation, the whole almost a routine that these servers, these waiters, the captain, the sommeliers, all they sort of have to do while trying to entertain the guests.
I see.
And it was fun to be uh, sort of, I would say, taken care of during your meal. So I felt very comfortable at restaurants at a young age. I loved eating out. Um, Living in New York, there's so many different options. Within a 3 block radius, you can have the best Italian, Korean, Japanese, Chinese, Greek, um, all these different cuisines. So I took full advantage of that and became a foodie at a very young age. Now, that never really transferred into wanting to be a chef. Um, Back then, chefs weren't on TV. This was
Right.
before the Food Network.
That's right.
But I did want to learn how to cook some of the things that I really enjoyed eating. And that led me into going to culinary school for just a 9-month program during my sabbatical. And, luckily my program really, they wanted us to get field experience. So they recommended interning at other restaurants. And I was able to do that as a student. And that's when I sort of really realized cooking as a career is fun. It's rewarding.
Yeah.
It makes people happy. And that's when I started considering.
How was it like working at the kitchen of Danielle and Masa?
Um, so I still believe Danielle is the toughest kitchen in this country to work for, to work in. I've worked at Masa. I've worked at many different other kitchens besides that, but Danielle is one of those restaurants where there's 140 seats, and we will do on a Friday night 350, 360 covers, and you can't make a mistake.
Wow.
So, and it's not like we had more cooks than other kitchens. We had the same number of cooks as, let's say, a Per Se or Le Bernardin, where there's only 60, 80 seats, but we have 140 seats. So we had to come in earlier. We had to work faster. and we just had to do more. And that made me really appreciate um, the work ethic
I
that
see.
goes in. And this, after Danielle, every other job was so much easier.
Wow.
And I do believe
Yeah.
that I'm a chef now. I train cooks and I have people working for me.
Right.
The fact that I worked so hard at Danielle, I think allows me to push my cooks a little bit more, a little bit further, because I know that physically, um, what I'm demanding of them is not impossible because I've already done it.
Right.
And I do believe that the harder you work while you're under people, um, eventually you can push your workers a little bit further.
I see. How is working at Masa different from Danielle?
So if Danielle taught me work ethic, I think what Masa taught me was just the the importance in ingredients, importance in natural ingredients, importance in seasonal ingredients. It's different when you work at a kitchen where there are 40 cooks, 40 chefs working for one restaurant. Um, and for such a large restaurant, you are only responsible for certain aspects, meaning, just the vegetables on your entree that goes with the meat, not even the fish. So we had entremetier is sort of like the vegetable cook for an entree, but at Danielle, because it was so big, we actually had an entremet for the fish entrees, and then we had an entremet for the meat entrees. So it's very, you see a small picture
I see.
of the big picture. Whereas Masa, it was a very small restaurant. I think Masa itself seats 24 or 28.
Wow, so small.
Yeah, and Bar Masa, which is the same kitchen, um, it seats about 40. So I got to sort of learn almost everything and work with all the ingredients and look at the bigger picture. And one of the reasons why masa is so expensive is because they get so many, almost all their ingredients from Japan.
I see.
It gets flown in several times a week. And of course, it's always seasonal. And a lot of the Japanese ingredients are very similar to Korean ingredients. The seasons are the same. They're very close together. So, not having worked at a Korean restaurant before, I did get to experience a lot of the ingredients that goes into Korean cuisine while learning how to cook Japanese cuisine at Masa.
So after you've worked at a French restaurant and a Japanese restaurant, why did you decide to open up a Korean restaurant?
So that was actually kind of easy. I was, I worked, I trained in a French culinary school. I interned at a couple of French restaurants. I worked at a French restaurant. The reason why I didn't continue with my French culinary training was because, you know, there is a difference when a Frenchman cooks French food than when a Korean man cooks French food.
I
Because
see.
there is this pride. There is this, as a chef, when you cook French food in the US, you are almost representing your culture, your history. And there's a responsibility in that. And there is a certain amount of pride. It's almost like, representing your country in, let's say, the Olympics or the World Cup. Um, and I didn't have that pride when I was
see.
cooking at Danielle. And I didn't have that pride when I was cooking at Masa because I was not French. I was not Japanese. I wanted to experience that pride. Um, and another reason was one of the chefs who I worked for told me when I was ready to open up my restaurant, um, the food itself should represent who you are, meaning the guests should be able to see your food and sort of guess what kind of person you are.
Really?
And that is so correct.
Yeah.
And for me, as much American influence I have in growing up, I still feel like my DNA is Korean.
Yeah. Even though you left at a very young age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still feel like when I land at Incheon Airport, 고향 온 것 같아. I feel like this is my hometown.
Wow.
It's because my ancestors still live there, were born there, died there. I've been to Korea almost every year since I left, so I was in tune with the culture.
Right.
Um,
Your parents, I mean, your mom
Mm.
was very encouraging of you keeping up with the Korean culture. When I was interviewing you for the book, you told me that she wouldn't even respond to you when you spoke to her in English.
yeah, I went to a boarding school in England where I was the only Asian person in the whole entire town, not just the school. Growing up there was discrimination. Um, it was, for her, it was sad if somebody who looks Korean, who was born in Korea, no matter how long they've lived outside of Korea, couldn't speak the native tongue.
Yeah.
So, and that's why my mother sent me almost every summer vacation to Korea to every year relearn the language, to understand the culture. And that's, another reason why I think I started cooking Korean food with my restaurant, because I knew that in New York, as good as a lot of the cuisines were, I thought Korean food was a little behind.
Yeah.
Yeah. In that, when you are a fine dining chef, when you cook at these expensive restaurants, you learn the importance of ingredients and natural ingredients. And you don't want to cook with chemicals because it's bad for the body. You don't want to buy beef that has hormones, antibiotics, that have chemicals inside. You don't want to use MSG to help things taste better just because it's cheating. There's no way something that can enhance something with no work
Right.
is harmless. And any kind of chemical that you consume, I believe, is unhealthy. And unfortunately, when you have restaurants being owned by not chefs but business people who need to make money, they are going to buy the cheaper ingredients that have chemicals in it, because one, they don't know any better, and two, it's as an owner, nobody really knows who the owners of the restaurants are. So it's not their reputation on the line. Whereas when it's a chef owned restaurant, everybody knows the decisions that are made when buying certain ingredients, when using MSG. And it is a decision that your reputation has to sort of fall back on, or the way your reputation is built. And I think most chefs don't want to be known as a cheater by using MSG.
Right.
And we didn't have that in Korea. In New York, we didn't have a chef that was cooking Korean food.
Right.
And I wanted to be the first one.
Yeah, and you were the first one. Since Danji opened, there's been many other Korean sort of more, I guess, fine dining like types of Korean restaurants, and I see them and popping up everywhere, and then I'm thinking, if you haven't done that, there, I don't think it would exist.
So these people, these people,
Yeah.
they're I know all of them.
Right.
I can't help myself but to apologize to them every time I see them
Why do you say that?
because of me,
Yeah.
they happen to open up a restaurant in New York City,
Right.
and they're working 110 hours a week and not getting paid a lot of money. It's a very, very difficult profession. It's a very difficult career, and it's a career where if you think money is a factor, you cannot stay long because money is not there to be made in cooking. What it is, it's a project of passion.
I see.
And no matter how, if you have to put money into the restaurant, you're still going to do it because it is your passion project. It is like a child that you don't give up on because he or she isn't perfect.
Right.
And that's what a restaurant is. And, I try to tell people that when they come for advice, when they're opening up the restaurant, and every single one of them, the Oichi guys, I told them how difficult it is. And Atoboy most recently, I told them there's just no money there. But those guys, even with me saying, don't do it, they still overcame that. And then they did it. And that to me is the only way to go, because no matter when, that's what I did. Everybody said, no, what are you doing?
Right.
Are you crazy?
Yeah.
And that made me fight harder. And hence Danji was born. Right. And it's still open and running well. I feel like I need to have that role with the younger cooks as well. I need to tell them, this is not easy. It's something that you may regret. And if they keep, do it anyway, I think eventually that could help them because they have to fight harder. And those guys now know what I mean or what I meant.
Yeah.
So we laugh it off.
So in the moments of, when everyone's telling you, no, are you crazy? This is never going to work. Like, how do you get the courage to keep trying and keep fighting?
Because you believe in yourself.
I see.
Because you believe in your food.
Yeah.
Because you know that the food that you are cooking, nobody has done before. And it's not just the menu item. With Korean food, there are certain foods that Korean restaurants have to have. So it's not having a unique menu item, but making it so that it's different and better, in your opinion, than anybody else's. For instance, I put tteokbokki on Hanjan's menu.
Oh, I love that one.
And the only reason why I put it on the menu is because I think mine is the best.
Yeah, and I have to agree. And I as a tteokbokki lover, I've tasted many, many different kinds all my life, and I think yours is the best.
Well, that's not why I said it, but it is that belief.
Yeah,
it is that faith in yourself, in that you have a story with your food that you want to share, that you want to tell. It's really like writing a book. Nobody, I think, writes a book to become rich.
Right. Yeah, there's no money to be made there either.
Yeah. But
except a few authors. Yeah, but
But it is this story that they have that's so unique, and they want the privilege to be able to tell it to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that is the gift of a book.
Right.
You have this author story that's unique. And I feel like that's what a restaurant is. You have a chef-run restaurant. It's a unique vision of maybe food that everybody knows about.
Yeah.
But it's the chef's way to make certain dishes. A unique sort of kind of story that the chef has that he tells through his food, through his menu.
So for people who have not been to Danji and Hanjan, which is Hanjan you opened in 2012, tell us about it.
So, it's tough to sort of describe my restaurants verbally, just because, like I said before, I would rather have the food.
I see.
The service, the decor, the whole puniki, all of that. I would rather have that tell the story to describe what it is. But I will tell you the difference between Danji and Hanjan. When I opened Danji, I don't think I was as Korean as I could have been. Meaning, I was very Korean American. I didn't speak the language very well. Even though I had visited Korea quite often, um, I never went there as a chef. So I created a restaurant that was very Korean American, that was very New York. I think the restaurant was more New York than Korean. The flavors in itself, I tried to make as authentic Korean flavors, but the whole restaurant, the inspiration was a New York uh, a restaurant that non-Koreans could be comfortable with.
I see.
But then after I opened Hanji, I studied and I researched a lot more of Korean ingredients, Korean food, and wanted to make the menu a lot more authentic, a lot more Korean ingredients driven. Um, and I just didn't have the space or the time or the decor of Tanji didn't go with the food that I wanted to make. So
I think it looks nice.
but it wasn't.
Yeah.
It's not as authentic.
I see. I see what you mean.
So
Yeah.
it really is. Like I said, going back to the book, I had a different story to tell. I didn't work changing a chapter or two from my original book, from my original story and restaurant. So I had a unique, different, more Korean story that I wanted to tell, and that's why Hanjan was born. Just the foundation is very different.
I see.
One is very Korean American, one is New York inspired. The other one is not even Seoul inspired. It's Korean 시골, 시장, Korean markets at these rural cities, rural towns. That's the inspiration of the menu at Hanjan.
I see. Do you have plans to open up a third restaurant?
So yes, but I can't talk about it.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So
It's because it's a story that hasn't been written yet.
I see.
It's a story that I don't even know the ending. It's a story that has a start.
Yeah.
That I have the inspiration.
Yeah.
Now I have to start writing it. So I can't really talk about it yet because everything that I say probably will change.
I see. Well, we look forward to hearing about and reading about it when you're ready to tell the story. So it must have been really challenging to, start working as a chef, open up your own restaurants and opening up two restaurants. When was the most difficult time for you?
I think the most difficult time was when we finally opened Danji. We opened in December of 2009, and it was a very cold winter.
Yeah.
Very, very cold winter. And we couldn't afford PR.
Yeah.
So we weren't in any of the magazines. People didn't even know we were open. So we were not busy. We were very quiet. We didn't have much customers the first 4 months. And those 4 months were difficult because you had bills to pay.
Right.
You had people to pay. I had just invested everything that I had.
Yeah.
My wife and I had raised money to put a down payment on the house, and we used all of it. And money wasn't coming in. So, in a financial sense, it was very difficult.
Yeah.
But I had faith in my food. My food was good. And the people who came to eat, they would come back. And that made me sort of a little bit more reassured. But then I also knew that good food doesn't always mean a successful business.
Right.
So you worry when you go to sleep. But fortunately, we started getting busy in April. The media started highlighting us. And since then, it has become a very financially successful restaurant. So it's a lot of it is luck.
Yeah.
But even if you're lucky, I think if you're not prepared with the good food, um, then that luck doesn't really go anywhere. So for me, the New York Magazine critic coming in was my sort of very lucky situation.
Right.
But we had worked very hard. While we were not busy, we were always trying to improve the food.
I see.
So the first 4 months, the fact that we weren't busy, we had a lot of feedback from the customers, feedback amongst each other into making better food, improving our food and service. That when the critic did come, I think we were ready. And luckily, they wrote actually a very glowing review. And that was the big start.
Yeah.
It was that one review from New York Magazine that then suddenly had all the other magazines coming, the newspapers coming. And we were very fortunate.
Yeah. So you've had such an illustrious career path, and you are also working as a judge for MasterChef Korea. How was that like?
A very interesting, fun experience. Having had the opportunity to spend an extended amount of time in Korea while being surrounded with people who are very interested in food, meeting people who they were so passionate with cooking, but they didn't have the skills yet because it's an amateur competition. It one re-energized me. Two reminded me that one of the reasons I love being a chef is teaching people, sharing my experiences, just sharing the mistakes that I've made, and my philosophy that helped me with my success. All of that is a huge factor in cooking, or being a chef, and I embraced it, and I loved my time in Korea, learning more about the Korean ingredients and Korean food in general.
Yeah. Do you sometimes see like your younger version of yourself in these aspiring chefs?
I don't know. I don't know. To be honest, I'm in a very unique. I have a very, very unique story.
Right. Yeah. I don't think anyone's quitting med school to become a chef in Korea just yet, right?
We had some. We had a policeman who wanted to quit. We had an engineer who wanted to, and I still have a lot of emails and messages from people in Korea who tell me they hate what they're doing and they want to quit.
Right.
And for me, I can't answer these emails. I can't respond because the courage to quit, to give up everything that you've worked so hard to attain and then start something new, it has to come from within.
That's true.
So if they're asking me, then you're not ready.
Right.
I think when you're in a situation where you're confronting somebody and asking for reassurance of the decision that you're about to make, you're already very different than what I went through because I didn't have those questions.
I see.
So simple answer is no. I have not met anybody who reminded me of myself.
Do you think that's something that can be learned? The persistence, the courage, the will to not give up. Do you think that could be learned, or is that something we're born with? Can that be nurtured?
I think it's a combination of everything. I think you have to be in a situation where you're desperate.
Right.
I think the definition of happiness you have to be sure with, because everybody's definition of happiness is different.
Yeah.
Um, the definition of success is very different. Um, and happiness and success is so personal and individual, that I believe these decisions, it has to come from within.
Yeah.
And that's just something that I learned
Yeah.
looking back. Like, I didn't know that my decision came from within. I was just trying to make the right decision for my future. But I didn't ask anybody, because who knows me more than me?
That is very wise. Yes.
Yeah. And who do I want to blame when it doesn't go well?
That's right.
I'd rather blame myself than
Yeah.
anybody else.
Right.
So, I feel like, I don't know if this was courage. I don't know if it was the way I was brought up. It could have been the age that I was at, because I wasn't young. Um, but being in a desperate situation, I think, I guess, helps
Right.
to really concentrate
Yeah.
on what the right decision is for your career.
How old were you when you?
I was 30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for most of the people, that's like, oh, you should already be kind of
Yeah.
chosen a path already. But I think the world has changed now. It's no longer we no longer live in a society where you just stick with one job and you just do it for the rest of your life and retire at 65 or 60 or 55. So yeah. So throughout your career, I have this belief, and a lot of the successful people that I've met, not a single person has succeed on his or her own. So who helps you to achieve your dreams?
I think everybody who works under me right now. I consider my team, just Danji and Hanjan can't be what it is without every single person who works there.
Right.
And I'm just a very small factor now. I started it. It's
Yeah.
my menu,
Yeah.
but the execution isn't done by me, because I teach the cooks how to cook. I teach the servers how to serve it. I make sure the servers know, the customers know how to eat it. It's every person really helps in executing my vision, my story, that I have to be thankful for them
Yeah.
to making this this story come true, because otherwise it would just be a menu.
Right.
I can write the menu and I can teach them how to cook it, but I can't cook for 150 people every day at both restaurants. So it is my team of cooks who make that menu that I wrote up come alive. And it is my servers who actually help so that the customers can enjoy it to
Yeah.
yeah.
Seems like you are very passionate about training and teaching, young people, and also helping people in need. So I know you recently started a foundation in Korea called Yori Chansang, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did that come about?
So, growing up in New York, I have friends who were adopted in the
Right.
70s and the 80s, and a lot of Koreans were adopted by American families back then. I still have friends who are chefs. Danny Bowen, Mission Chinese, adopted Korean descent, and back then in junior high and high school, I thought, it's really great that these American families are giving these Korean children a great opportunity, a loving family. But it would be so much easier for the child if the parents were Korean.
Yeah.
Just because, we look like each other. And
Right.
as loving as that family is, I
Mhm.
would go to the theater and I would see a father, a mother, Caucasian, two
Mhm.
sons, Caucasian, and one Korean daughter.
Yeah.
So I thought that as a Korean community, a Korean American community, we should adopt more of these
Right.
children.
Right.
So I discussed it with my wife
Yeah.
before getting married,
Right.
and she was all for it.
Yeah.
We had our son.
Yeah.
He was about 5. We had an extra bedroom in
Yeah.
in our apartment, so I suggested to my wife, maybe it's the time to adopt
Yeah.
a little girl from Korea because we
Mhm.
have a son.
Yeah.
And she said, "Oh, okay, hold on. Let me think about it for a couple of days."
Yeah.
And I said, "Okay, sure." And then a couple of days later, she said, even with our own son, um, we discipline him, and we get angry at him when he does uh, things.
As all parents do,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. And she every night she has so much guilt when he's going to sleep because she realizes it was just him being a 4-year-old, being a 5-year-old. So she says, that guilt is bearable, but she has it.
I see.
But imagine that child isn't yours biologically.
Mhm.
Imagine that child, and most Korean orphans aren't really orphans. Most of them are abandoned, so their parents are alive.
Right.
They just can't take care of them.
Mhm.
So you're raising a child whose parents are alive and having to discipline them like they're your own,
Mhm.
and then feeling the guilt at night, having the factor that you know that child has parents. What if that parent knew,
Oh.
the way you were raising the child? Would they approve or not?
I see.
It was just these factors where I think um, adopting was a lot more complex emotionally
Right.
than I thought it was going to be. Um, so we decided to hold off until we were more emotionally ready. And then that led to a little bit of guilt because, I grew up thinking I was going to help these orphan children. So while I was feeling guilty, I was in Korea filming MasterChef Korea, and I had a lot of time there because I don't have restaurants, I don't do business there. I was just filming, and I started looking for organizations that helped orphanages, orphan kids, um, because there's so many in New York. We do so much charity as a chef, as a restaurant.
Right.
But in Korea, none of the chefs did anything like that. It just wasn't cultural. So, and the ones that I asked, the chefs that I asked, they said, why don't you go to a church? Because they're the ones usually doing that. And I thought, it's different when a chef does it because
Yeah.
there are unique ways where we can help
Right.
children. So I decided to sort of do a little research. I visited some orphanages. I talked to the orphanage directors. And what I found out was Korean orphanages are pretty well run. The children are taken care of well. They're educated. They're fed well. But the law is that at 18, they have to leave the orphanage with a stipend of $5,000. Well, 500,000. And the problem with that is at 18, these kids don't have any family to go to.
Right.
Some of them have lived most of their lives in that orphanage.
That's their family.
Yes. They can't get jobs because they're orphans. There's still this stigmatism of, if you're an orphan, you didn't have parents who taught you stealing was wrong. So these kids can't even get jobs at a 7-Eleven.
I see.
They can't continue their education because, $5,000 doesn't even get them housing for a year.
Right.
So they're really sort of lost and on their own.
Mhm.
And what happens is the girls turn into prostitution, human trafficking. The boys turn into organized crime because those are the organizations that give them sort of this pseudo family structure that they're yearning for.
That's right.
So it's just a very bad trap,
Mhm.
a very bad cycle. And this one director told me, what she really wants is for these kids to leave and to be proud of who they become.
Mhm.
So they come back to visit.
Yeah.
She said most of the kids don't come back to visit because they're so ashamed of who they've become and what they've become.
I see.
And within more research, I found out that these children, Korean children or Korean people who commit suicide between the age of 18 and 22, 4 of 5 come from orphanages.
Oh, wow.
So, and 4 of 5, meaning every 5 people that commit suicide between 18 and 22, 4 of them came from an orphanage. So it's not a system that prepares these children to succeed, no matter how well they're taken care of. When they're in the system, they need help.
Right.
So I found this. I got a bunch of chefs, and we created this 요리 천사 based on the French apprenticeship program. We take kids who are 16, 15. We train them, teach them how to cook, so that when they turn 18 and when they're about to leave, they have a job waiting for them.
That's
at
great.
these restaurants.
That's amazing.
So, we started this year. We have now 8 chefs and restaurants helping us. And basically what we do now is we go to the orphanage every Wednesday to cook a very spectacular meal.
That's amazing.
Because, we realized as a chef, we became chefs because no matter how hard it is, we love food.
Right.
These kids don't love food yet.
Right.
They don't know what it means to love food.
Yeah.
So we thought it's more important that these kids understand and love to eat food. So our first project in 요리 천사 is called 맛남.
Matnam.
맛남.
Because
we're introducing,
yeah,
we're introducing them to food.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons why I do go to Korea quite often.
Yeah.
It is my turn to cook 5 times a year. Everybody takes turns. And plus, I have so many chefs in Korea who are just doing this because they feel like it'll help the society. And they trusted me into committing to this project that, I want to help them as much as possible too. So even when it's not my turn, I end up being in Korea and doing this with them.
That's amazing. So how can people find out about it? How could people get involved and help out?
So far, if you are a chef in Korea, if you work in the restaurant field, if you work at a restaurant, we're always looking for restaurants who is ready to take on a student to be their mentor, for them to intern at your restaurant on the weekends when they're 15, 16, for them to learn how to be a cook at your restaurant. So, if you feel like that's something that you think is worth doing, then please contact me. And also, if not, or if you are living in the US, then we are always taking donations. We have a GoFundMe page, Hooni Kim. And also, you can find more information at www.yorichansa.org, YORICHUNSA.
That's great. I hope many listeners will participate and support you.
Thank you.
So we're almost at time. And my last question too is, you have achieved so many dreams, and what is your next dream?
Um, I feel like you're right. I am living a dream.
Yes, you
I
are.
am very happy with what I'm doing, and you know, success is I'm living it.
Yeah.
But I don't think I ever really thought of living in a situation that I am living now.
Really? So the amount of success you've achieved, you didn't imagine it?
No,
No.
no.
Wow.
I always, my dream
Mm-hmm.
in the beginning was cooking my food, and people would be interested enough to pay money
Right.
to eat my food.
Yeah.
And I think that is most
Mm-hmm.
chefs' dreams when they start. And from there, I think I've achieved a lot more
Yeah.
in success, critical success, in fame, but none of that I really was looking for. But I'm glad that I was able to experience it, and I'm
Yeah.
still able to experience it. Um, and I'm just enjoying that. I don't
Yeah.
have, I'm willing to work hard. I think the next thing that I want to do is, you're right, another restaurant that
Yeah.
I'm really willing to work hard at. But
Mhm.
I'm not really thinking of what more happiness that's gonna bring.
Yeah.
It's just, every restaurant
Mhm.
is a new chapter,
Yeah.
or a new book, or a new story.
Mhm.
And I'm just very fortunate enough to be in a situation where I can tell it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, thank you. And where can people find you if they want to contact you or follow you on Instagram or Facebook?
um, Whoa, okay. So I guess Instagram would be somewhere I check the most. It's basically Hooni Kim.
Okay.
And I'm most of the time in New York at Danji or Hanjan in the kitchen, um, cooking and teaching,
Yeah.
and sometimes drinking with customers. So
That's
stop
amazing.
by.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your stories with us.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the conversation, I would really appreciate it if you can subscribe and write a review for the podcast. It really helps me to spread the word. If you have any comments, I would love to hear from you. You can go to celinalee.co, that is CELINALEE.co, and leave me a message there. So thank you again, and I'll be back soon with another episode.